waiting for the...
Well, I think it's Wednesday, and it's the 22nd of May. It's 2019, and we've started the show on time the last couple of days, but we're a few minutes late tonight. But I hope you've got your sandwiches and your flask with you, because it's going to be a long do. We've got lots of things to talk about, and I've got a guest today, Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist side of the party, and we've got loads of bits of paper, so my shuffling paper days are back again, and we're going to start straight out of the starting block with a UN report. Cruel Tories dismantling the social security net. Well, this won't be the first thing that the Tories have, the UN have said about this current government in Westminster, will it? Because we had the poverty guy came not so long ago, and let's have a little read of what it says here. It says the SNP has criticised the Tory government for its deliberate deliberate failure to tackle poverty after the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty reports that the UK's social security net has been badly damaged by the Tories' ideology and their austerity agenda. What do you think about that? Well, there's nothing to say, is there? Really? No, I'm not allowed to say that. You've got to say that.
Do you really want me to comment? It has been proven time and time again that austerity is just not working. It's a political choice. As you say, it's an ideological choice. And it's the disparity between the rich and the poor that's never
I've got
going to
some
get
figures
fixed.
here, rich and the poor. What does it say here? We got 1/5, that's 14 million folk living in poverty.
Yep.
And then we've got 40% of children will be living in poverty by 2021. That's 1 in 2. Now, there was a little bit a few weeks ago where Nicola Sturgeon and her government were getting blamed for this, and they were saying it was a great big story, but actually this was a UK-wide thing, and people were trying to carve it off and just say it was Scotland, but it wasn't.
Well, you see, this is where Scottish Labour fall down for me, honestly. Is that they can... I'm sorry to be non-PC, but a blind man in a dug can see that this is coming from Westminster. And yet Richard Leonard, time and time again, constantly says that he will not ask for the devolvement of the benefit system to Scotland, and Scotland has to carry on mitigating the worst of Tory austerity.
Yeah. Do you want to let me read you this bit? Our UK social security systems is a digital, sanitised version of the 19th century workhouse.
I think that's very accurate.
That's a direct quote from this report from the UN.
Yeah, I think that is very, very accurate and a very, very good descriptor.
It says the report acknowledges the efforts of the SNP Scottish Government to mitigate these impacts of their austerity policies, which is what you've just said, despite the cuts into Scotland's block grant funding. There's praise for Scotland's new social security system, a system based on dignity and respect.
Correct.
And that's it should be, shouldn't it? I mean, people shouldn't feel as if just because maybe they're out of a job or they've been sick or there was somebody the other day said to me that they got their pension and it said on the letter, your benefit will. And they were very distressed by that because that was a pension they'd paid for.
Yeah. You see, and this is the other thing as well about the Tory government, is the fact that pensions are not a benefit, but the Tory government views pensions as a benefit, and it has been proven their stance against the WASPy women. They are basically withholding what they are duly owed because it does not fit into their austerity programme in order to pay them out.
Yeah, and you wonder where all that money went. Because, like you, I've paid all the national insurance stamps. Even when I was abroad, I paid them.
Yeah.
And, Anyway, what else have we got here? Let's see. Neil Gray, MP, the SNP Work and Pension spokesperson. I beg your pardon, I didn't mean to say man. It was spokesperson. This UN report is a damning indictment of the Tory government and its shameful legacy of worsening poverty and inequality across the UK. The UK government must halt its austerity agenda now and follow Scotland's lead by building a social security system based on dignity and respect.
It's fine words. I've got a lot of respect for Neil. However, as long as Scotland is in the UK, we are always going to be under an austerity cloud, right? If there's some sea change and Labour take over the administration, austerity is not going to be ended overnight. Do you know what I mean? Now, the Tories famously last year said that austerity is over. Well, I'm sorry, no, it's not. Right? And how long have we been suffering under Tory austerity? 10 years. Right? There is research out there to say that once austerity is completely, finally over, it'll take a 5-year build in order to top out of an austerity based. The recovery from austerity doesn't happen overnight.
No, surely not.
Do you know what I mean? And the warm words and stuff like that from Labour with regards to child poverty, the inequality, all the rest of it is all fine. But they need to do some real research and come up with substantial facts and figures as to how they're going to fix it.
Yeah, and there are several things, about money that's given to folk in a way of welfare, because that money does go into the economy, and it keeps people's businesses going if you've got a little bit of money. And really, isn't that one of the biggest bothers with the society we've created? People don't have that spare bit of cash in their pocket to go and buy a cup of coffee or something.
Well, unless it's £5.25 for a milkshake that you can throw over a certain...
Well, maybe we shouldn't get that. I don't know, because of course that does take our minds off the story. So I've got Alison Johnston's MSP for the Scottish Greens parliamentary co-leader.
Yep.
She said Philip Alston's damning conclusions are yet more evidence that the UK government must stop welfare reforms that are pushing hundreds of thousands of Scots into poverty and substantially reinvest in our social security system. That Alston has called the UK government, the UK system, a far cry from human rights, should be a major wake-up call for the UK government to reverse course and for the Scottish government to accelerate its positive work to recognise social security as a human right.
Right, well, I've got a lot of time for the Scottish Greens, right? There are an awful lot of good work that they do, and obviously, they are pro-indie. However, I fall down a wee bit on that statement where she's sort of like having a thinly veiled swipe at the SNP. Now,
well, it's election time. Come on.
Well, of course,
do that,
yeah, of course. But in saying that, the benefit system that Scotland is currently forming at this moment in time, I think is a fantastic approach of how Jean Freeman's actually started it off and carried on by Anne Somerville. That what I was saying to you earlier on before we come on camera was you can't run before you can walk. Now I noticed that Tom Arthur, MSP from Renfrewshire South, he was chatting in the chamber the other day there that before the end of the Parliament there's another 8 competencies in the benefit system still to get rolled out, such as the funeral care and stuff like that. So for the Tories to then turn round in the House of Commons and say you're not using the powers that are given to you, well, no, it doesn't happen overnight. It will take time, and we're doing it properly. We're doing it right, and it is not going to fall down. Unlike your policies, where you're constantly having to revisit the approach of universal credit, the waiting times for payouts and stuff like that, you know, because you didn't think it through properly to start with. So we're not doing that. We're actually thinking it through properly. We're then putting it into action, and then we're saying that it's going to work so that we don't have to revisit it, because it's a bit like double handling. Do you know what I mean?
There's a bit from Community Secretary Aileen Campbell here. She says this: today's report from the United Nations is a devastating analysis of the UK government's austerity programme, describing the policies pursued since 2010 as retrogressive and in clear violation of the country's human rights obligations. But we can see too that human rights disappears out of the window with the EU if we have a Brexit.
See, this is a really difficult situation that we're in, and at the moment, I personally don't think that the UN is doing enough to hold the UK government to account. Whilst we're in this unholy union, unfortunately, we're going to get tarred with the same brush. You know, I mean, obviously, once we're independent and we are co-working with our European partners in the Brussels Parliament, then, you know, we can actually say, well, you know, this is what we're doing. You know, we don't care what the British government are doing, the UK government are doing. That's up to them. But as I say, I think the UN need to come down harder on them. And they need to highlight it on the European stage. They need to stand up and shame them, because but it's simply not good enough.
The UK, I mean, the UN's on the UK's tail over those islands too. That was again in the news. We reported it here on Broadcasting Scotland, but those islands where the Americans have got their base out in the Indian Ocean somewhere. Yeah, I mean, say that again. The Chagos Islands. Anyway, let me just do a little bit more from Aileen Campbell here, and then we'll move on a bit. In Scotland alone, the UK government welfare cuts are expected to lead to a reduction in social security spending of 3.7 billion. And that's not even now. That's the year after this year, and over 21. Professor Alston has been scathing of the universal credit, calling it a universal discredit. He criticises the long wait for the first payment, the digital exclusion built into the system, the lack of split payments, and the negative impact it has on women. We have continued to raise the universal credit problems with the UK government.
Yeah. And out of that, to be honest with you, and I'd be curious, I know that you're the questioner and I'm the invited guest, but I'll ask you a question. That in itself lends further debate into a citizen's wage.
Yes, I mean, that's been trialled, isn't it, in Finland, and some people say it's quite a good idea.
Yeah.
We have mentioned this on the programme before. I know that Switzerland had a referendum upon it, and I think that the people were for it.
Yeah.
They'd actually done it on the basis of automation taking people's jobs. But I think the government there were concerned that everybody would be magnetised towards the Swiss landscape and want to go and live there. That was
the wider implications of that, as you touched on earlier on. It would benefit rural communities, and if there's money circulating in rural communities, that bodes well for shops.
Surely.
High street.
It all flows one to the other, doesn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah.
And also, that little comment made by the Swiss government, I didn't quite gather it, because if you want to go and live in Switzerland, you have to have three things. You have to pay your health insurance, you have to have a place to live, and you have to have a contract to prove you've got that. And you have to have some form of income, and you have to have a contract to prove of that. With those three things, you don't need an immigration policy, because it excludes anybody who can't do those three things.
Well, correct.
Anyway, let's move on, because we've done quite a lot upon the UN and their view on the various things. But the next bit of my pile of papers here tonight is Brexit. Oh, I've never talked about that before, have you?
Brexit? What's Brexit?
No, I don't know what does this word mean? Well, it might not mean anything, because we're slowly, slowly, how fast is it? But we're coming to a situation where it's Brexit with no deal or no Brexit. And some people don't think that that's much of a choice.
I still don't I still don't think that it will happen. I think there'll be another extension come Halloween, because obviously Theresa May's days are numbered, or should I say hours.
Well, I think that she's probably out the door now. I was listening to Tom Tugendhat, the Committee Foreign Affairs, and from what he said, and he's kind of one of those more mild-mannered guys down there. I think that it is the end of the road for her.
So is that now Dominic Grieve in sort of like caretaker mode at the moment? Is he doing his caretaker manager?
The way Tom Tugendhat put it was that, well, of course, we wouldn't just chuck her out and take away the key tonight, but she's got to say that there's going to be an election for a new leader. But of course, she doesn't do that, does she?
No.
Because actually, she doesn't listen. And the problem they've got now. The problem they've got now is that Mrs May said one thing to the cabinet, and when she came into the Parliament, she changed what she said.
Yeah, and I think that was because she had the words of the 1922 committee ringing in her ear. I mean, if she hasn't phoned for the Pickfords wagon, I'm pretty sure they have.
Yeah. So let's see what the Labour thing says. Labour would never be forgiven if they facilitate a Tory Brexit deal. Scotland's still shut out and being ignored by Westminster. The SNP has said Labour would never be forgiven in Scotland if they facilitate Theresa May's devastating Brexit deal. I'm sorry, I read that twice because it was in bold capitals and then it was in small figures afterwards. So, but it doesn't matter. After the Prime Minister's letter to Jeremy Corbyn, Ian Blackford MP for the SNP, the leader of them in the House of Parliament, said neither the Tories or Labour can be trusted to respect Scotland's decision to remain in the EU.
He's quite correct. He is quite correct. Let's face it, for the last 3 years, Theresa May's been running from pillar to post trying to get this deal through, right? And she has not spoken to Labour, she's not spoken to the SNP, she's not spoken to the Lib Dems, not spoken to the Greens at all, right? Within the last 12 weeks, she's suddenly tried to do a deal with Labour at the last gasp. And you know, Labour just knew that there was nothing. She was never going to cave in on her red lines, right? She was never willing to compromise. Although she said she's looking for compromise, she's not, right? She's looking basically to garner support for her deal, to get it through, and then she can say, right, okay, that's me. I've delivered the first leg of Brexit. I can walk away with my hands clean and walk through the wheats of barley, right? Corbyn, to his credit, has said, you know, that he won't back that deal. Fine, fair play. But Corbyn has yet, for me, to come out and say what he does back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because
well, Corbyn said to her in the Parliament today that her deal was just the same, and he said he would not back it because the government's in such disarray, and any deal that they make with her would be probably swept aside by the next leader.
Correct. Yeah. But the only problem again for me with Jeremy Corbyn is his stance on freedom of movement. It's his stance on workers' rights. No, actually, why am I saying stance? Because he's not standing. Do you know what I mean? He's not standing
Because
up for workers.
The freedom of movement, though, that's always the bother, isn't it? It's this xenophobic idea that these people are, and yet, if you go back through history, I mean, we've had the Windrush scandal. We were inviting folk to come and help us after the war. 1942, they went out into the highways and the byways and picked up any vagrant they could find to give them work.
Yeah.
You see, when people have needed, it's the old supply and demand, isn't it? Adam Smith, where supply equals demand, and there's a price to be paid.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was trying to concentrate on what you were saying, and I got a message in my ear, and she said.
That's live television, folks.
Yes, surely. Okay, but yes, Tories, £30,000 a year. Post-Brexit salary threshold slammed as an unreasonable, irrational. Well, I mean, that's it, isn't it? I just told you the 3 criteria for Switzerland.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any amount of money you've got to be earning. As long as you've got enough to feed yourself, you're okay.
Yeah.
And somewhere you've got to live, and you can pay your health insurance. Here, they're asking folk to have £30,000 a year. Yeah. And I can't quite. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't earn £30,000 a year. Nowhere close.
Do you know? Here's a question for you. Do you know what the minimum wage is for a first-year apprentice? Just say, for argument's sake, BAE Systems, who are currently taking on apprentices at this moment.
Well, I have no idea, but I'm sure you do.
£3.81.
£3.81. Well, take a wee while to save for one of those cups of coffee you were talking about earlier, wouldn't it?
For someone leaving school to start on an apprenticeship of £3.81.
I mean, I could go on about Switzerland
What
again
year
because I've got a
are we
great
living
deal of
in?
experience with that.
What year are we living in? When I left school at the tender age of 17, I was forced onto one of Margaret Thatcher's work schemes, and it was £25 a week on the YOP scheme. £25 a week. And my first wage, I remember, after I finished the 6 months YOP scheme, my first wage jumped up to £120. Right? Now, an 18-year-old doing 40 hours a week at £3.81 will struggle to earn £120 per week. And yet, their criteria is that the 30,000, if you look at the first intern of a trainee nurse, their base salary is around about 17,500 to 18,000, right? Where are you going to get migrants to come in and fill those jobs?
Yeah, and it causes such lots of problems, doesn't it, with families too, because people get split up, and I've got personal stories about that. I could
not
tell
only
you,
that,
it's
you
wrong.
can also link it on to the fact that the average rental price of a house these days in the private market,
Sure.
2-bedroom, you're looking at £650.
Yeah.
What's
this? Let's move on a little bit, and we got the British Steel too. You see, because there's another
Don't get me started
big
on
bother
British Steel.
from the Brexit thing, and they're blaming it on the Brexit, aren't they? Really, British Steel guys putting 5,000 jobs directly at risk, endangering thousands more in the supply chain, and which is what we were talking about with the universal credits and the welfare payments. I mean, it's the supply chain that covers, isn't it?
I think it's worthwhile to point out that the figure quoted the wider impact on the surrounding communities of the steel industry is roughly about 20,000. So if you add the 20,000 to the 5,000, that is a more realistic figure, right? What they have to do is they have to do a direct correlation now, because British Steel has come out and said this is solely because of Brexit, right? Whereas the car industries in the last couple of months have said, oh, it's nothing to do with Brexit, it's just restructuring. Well, I'm sorry, my arse, right? What do cars get processed with? What are cars made out of? They're made out of steel. Do you know what I mean? You know, somebody was saying earlier on today in the House of Commons that not British Rail, but UK Rail something like 90% of the output of British Steel goes towards UK Rail. No, I'm sorry. you know, since 1960, Beeching ripped up all the rails and stuff like that. You know, and the infrastructure is far worse now than what it was back in the 60s. Do you know what I mean? If car production is falling because of the base price of steel, right, in Britain, because of these operating costs that the Tories will not move on, right? The Scottish Government, when they jumped in to help out Tata, they immediately looked at the operating costs and stuff like that with regards to the tax implications and stuff like that, and what have you, and basically worked out an operating deal. The Tories have never been willing to do that, right? Now, everybody knows, you know, from the 70s onwards, the Tories hate British Steel. Thatcher, it was a bane in her life, because British Steel, coal mining, shipbuilding, it was the heart of unionism. It was the heart of trade unionists. It's where trade unionists could actually say, we're not happy with this, we want our rights protected, you know, we want proper recompense for a proper week's work, we want proper breaks, we want health and safety addressed, we want proper holidays.
And again, you see, all this is stuff that's protected by the European Union, isn't it?
Correct, exactly. But this is everything that the Tories want to undo.
And yet, you know, there was this spat that we've mentioned too between Bill Grant at Ayr, the MP for there, and the SNP over the Trident business of renewing all that and all the money it costs to make those jobs that are so wonderfully. Actually, these, relatively speaking, are quite cheap jobs, aren't they? If they put this little bit of money in,
yep,
and support them. But the man who deals with that, he said on when I was listening to him earlier on that it was something to do with, oh, you can't do it, it's against the rules. But I mean, they break a lot of rules already with a lot of other things.
Well, the Tories are famous at breaking rules, you know what I mean? And you know, I can't remember who once favourably said it, probably Oscar Wilde, that rules are there to be broken. Do you know what I mean? But again, it's an interesting, you know, to come away from the Tories, shine a wee light on Labour at this moment in time. I was a GMB rep, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me why they're constantly jumping up and down about Faslane and Coolport, you know, that they're wanting to protect their members' jobs and all the rest of it. No, wait a minute, I'm sorry, how many members have you got? 350. Right, the Scottish Government want to redevelop Faslane and Coolport as a conventional maritime base without nuclear weapons, and their estimate costs for employment is 1,200. 1,200. That's a wee bit more of a markup than 350.
Yeah. Let me just, you know, we've talked about the Labour quite a bit now in this discussion. But not once, really, have we mentioned Richard Leonard, who is actually the boss of Labour in Scotland.
Tigger.
I mean,
Tigger.
I mean, why is it that we only mention Jeremy Corbyn rather than?
Because Labour, an awful lot of people don't understand. Sorry, that's very condescending. I do apologise. People often forget that there is no Scottish Labour. There is no Scottish Tories.
So he's like the vice captain then?
There is no Scottish Lib Dems, right? They are not registered as electoral parties within the UK.
Yeah, because the Liberal Dems are they're Scottish or English, aren't they? They've got a separation.
But
federal systems.
So Richard Leonard has to follow what the
Jeremy
London
says.
Head office.
That's why
says.
they're always sitting so close together in those selfies.
Yeah, and it's the exact same with Ruth Davison as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, as you've got to Ruth Davison, we've got a story about her, so why don't we go to there?
Dear old Ruthie.
I mean, we could obviously all these things we could discuss all night, but let's I just noticed this. It says Davison flip flops. Now, I don't know if that means that she's bringing out a new line in footwear or what, but I'm not going to read the title this time. I'm going to go smack into the smaller print. The SNP slammed Ruth Davidson for the latest in a long line of flip-flops after saying she would work with Boris Johnson if he were to become the next Prime Minister. Well, I think we all knew that she didn't like him.
Yeah, how does that work out for her LGBT stance? Boris isn't very sort of like politically correct when it comes down to discussing people's gender, stuff like that. I mean, what was it he famously said about, what was it, Pekingese? Coloured people?
Oh my goodness gracious! I mean, you know.
I mean, where is the credibility?
But you know what gets me about all these things, that really what people do in their own personal lives and who they love and who they care for, it doesn't really affect anybody but them in their small circle, does it? Why would we have to put this in? Well, of course we have to put it in because so many years these poor people have had their rights denied them. And I've never understood how people have got enough time to worry about that. But let's go on a little bit with Ruth. And what else did she say? Let's have a look. Tom Arthur, MSP, said, Boris Johnson is a liability. His career has been littered with incompetence, scandal and self-interest. Just last month, Ruth Davidson barred him from attending the Tory conference. Well, there probably wasn't room for him in there because there wasn't a very big room, really. But maybe there would have been a chair at the back. Let's see. Ruth Davidson barred him from attending the Tory conference, but is now apparently getting ready to welcome him as her boss. Which brings us back all of us to Richard Leonard and Jeremy Corbyn, doesn't it? With that. This is just the latest of a long line of shameless U-turns and flip-flops we've seen from her. For Ruth Davidson to throw her support behind Boris Johnson shows the Tories are in a worse state than previously imagined. And yet, you know, I mean, it's still early days in a contest for the new Prime Minister of the UK, and there'll be a good deal of candidates, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but what it does at this moment in time is it shows up a lack of credibility, right? Now, Boris Johnson, everybody knows that, you know, I'm not sure whether Boris actually sort of like gets on with Nigel Farage, but the worrying thing, hopefully, which we'll go on to talk about with regards to tomorrow's vote, is that if Farage actually gets somewhere with this Brexit party, although he's not elected, he will heavily influence Boris Johnson. And anything that comes out of Boris Johnson's mouth will heavily influence Nigel Farage. Right? Now, this goes to coalescing this band of right-wing, the rise of right-wing politics, populism politics within England at this moment in time. Right? Thankfully, we're seeing a bit of a decline in Wales with regard to this. Plaid Cymru are starting to make some inroads, and to the credit as well, so is the Greens. But as long as you've got these two big, they are political beasts. You can't get away from it. You know, as much as, you know, Boris likes to portray himself as the bumbling court jester, but he's not really. He's quite, he knows exactly what he's up to, right? And the same with Farage, right? The only thing about Farage is if you were to hit him over the head with a mallet, he'd be like a Bugs Bunny cartoon where it would just dollar signs, you know, would just turn up in his eyes. And that is what it's all about. It's all about money.
Yeah. The dollar signs, and of course now we saw a little bit of a crumbling at the edge, didn't we, the other day in Austria, where their Vice-Chancellor was caught, doing illegal things with money, really, and it's brought the whole Austrian government down. Now, there you look to America and you see how hard they've been trying to find things against Trump. But again, he's a little bit watery with the duck, you know, with the water, you know, just pouring off him.
I mean, Trump's always been like that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, he is the original Mr. Teflon. But if you look back a couple of years ago to Silvio Berlusconi, and that, you know, that's just like money was you know, like going from one hand out to the other. Do you know what I mean? There's a saying in Italian, it's cinque mani. You know, 5 hands. You don't know what one's going where.
Shall I dare put this in? I mean, when you think about Theresa May, I don't think anybody. I mean, oh, is she? Oh, no, she wouldn't do things like that, would she?
Yes, she would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's one thing for you. I was very interested. I'm trying to remember. Ronnie Cowan, just to diverse for a wee bit, Ronnie Cowan gave a speech on legalising cannabis for medicinal purposes on the NHS. Fantastic speech. I'm absolutely 100% with him on that. It's a subject that we could spend hours on. But you do know who holds one of the biggest licenses within the UK for cannabis manufacturing?
Tell me.
Theresa May's husband.
Oh. Well, there you go.
Should we just leave that one there?
Yeah, I think we better. Now,
Google it, folks. Google it.
It's a wee bit difficult because, you know, I'm not meant to say this, but my earpiece has gone wrong. I can't hear anything that Linda's trying to tell me.
Excellent. Right. Can we carry on then? Can we carry on then with?
But
how's about we draw a pie chart with all the dirty money that's flying around between Aaron Banks, Richard Cook of the East Renfrewshire Conservatives, the DUP, linked to Trump. Where does all that money go? It's circulating around the Better Together campaign and the UK Tories. It doesn't. You don't have to be Philip Marlowe to draw up the dots and win a major prize. Right? The UK politics is flooded with dirty money, dirty deals, and it is all.
Because Nicola Sturgeon said yesterday that milkshaking thing that was done to Nigel Farage, it was a shame, she said, because it actually took people's minds away from the fact that they were trying to find out a little bit more about where this funding was coming from.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what these kind of things do, don't they? Now, I think that we did have a thing to introduce stuff about the European elections.
All right.
I think we had a kind of a nice little film. So I'm going to say this, and now, I'm going to say it straight to the camera, and now the European Union elections. This thing's me down. Oh, nice little film there. Now, of course, a few weeks ago I wrote something to somebody. I said, if this was an election for a parliament in the UK or Holyrood or a council election, these things would be now forefront of every news programme. We'd have debates, but it's the European Union elections, and so who really cares? But I've actually been proved a bit wrong, because it has been a short run into these, and actually people have picked up pace, haven't they? Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had the Green Party in the studio and had their manifesto, and we've done a lot of reporting. We went to a hustings on Saturday night and saw all the people, and it was wonderful, the hustings, because the room was full, absolutely full, and young people. And when I say young, Chris, I mean half your age, or maybe more, and so it was absolutely fantastic to see all. And also, what was fantastic was to see the panel. Now, although I can't give you that everyone was up to speed with all the information, a lot of them were very, what I would call, young folk, And I thought it was fantastic. And I have received leaflets from all the different parties through the mail. I wasn't sure about the Tory one because it says Scotland was a region. But I think that might be a little bit difficult for some people. But these are really important elections. Yeah. The most important of the European elections so far, I think, although I would have liked them to become important before this. But tell me your stance on...
Well, it's essentially imperative that we have a really big turnout tomorrow. Normally EU elections are a very, very poor turnout. And I was talking to Kirsten Oswald, our business convener, who was our ex-MP for East Wren, and she was saying that the turnout at the moment is sort of like looking to be bottoming out around about 30%, which is really, really poor. It means that there is not as much as people engaged with it. Yeah, I mean, people are asking questions about the EU, but an awful lot of people, because Britain is in this mindset of we're leaving the EU, an awful lot of people are saying, well, why are we bothering to go and vote in the EU elections? But the SNP's message has been consistent. Again, it's been consistent in the fact that we have to put out a strong show of solidarity towards the European Union. If we can get 3 or maybe even, God willing, 4 MEPs, it tells Westminster everything it needs to know about Scotland's rights and wishes to remain European. After that, they have no argument. Their argument holds no water with regards dragging Scotland out of the EU against their will.
Let's run through all the parties to make sure that we're not being biased to anyone particular.
Not at all.
So I suppose I call them out and you tell me their position. I mean, like, there's some who are for independence of Scotland and for staying in the European Union. There are some who are against these things. So let's run through them.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's start with... I got a leaflet from the New Brexit Party. So obviously it's easy to do that one. What are they for, against everything?
They are for coming out of the European Union, taking back control of their own lands, their own borders, their own...
Control of what is the question, I think.
Exactly.
Okay, so then we move up, move down to UKIP.
Pass.
So that's much the same then. It's just, all it is
Pass.
I mean, we don't know what the stance of these two people are on, these two parties are on independence of Scotland, but they're definitely both for the leaving.
Oh no, they are wholly against Scotland leaving the UK Union. That's quite clear. They are a British establishment party, but they don't have any pro-European policies. So and the only reason that they wish to be in there, the only reason that they wish to be in there is to cause upset.
Yeah. So they want out of the European Union, but they want to preserve the United Kingdom's union, Scotland and
which is an anomaly.
They want to hold on to Scotland.
It's a real anomaly, because they wish Britain to be an independent country, but they don't want Scotland to be an independent country. So where is the fairness in that?
Okay.
Where's the fairness in that?
So we move on to the new party, the Change Party.
Again, it was
slightly different with the Change, though.
It was Colin Mackay the other night there on the thing on Scotland Tonight, and he was interviewing the chap from Change, and he said, "What is it you want to change in Scotland?" And he said, "Nothing." Not a thing. Yeah. They have nothing to offer Scotland whatsoever.
In contrast to the other two, they want to stay in the European Union.
They do,
and they want to preserve the UK Union.
Yeah,
they're not for independence of Scotland.
Yeah.
So then, where do we go to Labour?
Labour.
Oh no, let's go the other way around. Conservatives.
Conservatives, right?
The Tories.
Right. again, they want everything from Europe, but they want to give nothing back. That is basically the way that I see it. They want every bit of the pie, but no cream, thank you. So what Theresa May's been working towards for the last 3 years is so unachievable because, again, as I mentioned it earlier on, she's unwilling to compromise on her red lines, which is freedom of movement, the border of Northern Ireland, yada, 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 yada. No change.
A bit like that incident with Donald Tusk where there was the cherry pie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't... they said it at the very beginning, didn't they? It's not a cherry-picking game.
No, it's not.
It's all or nothing. And so we move up then maybe Labour?
Labour. Again, I can't get past Jeremy Corbyn, and as a socialist, I had high hopes for Jeremy Corbyn, but the fact that the European Union have said that they will not renegotiate anything pretty much tells you that how's he going to guarantee a deal any better than Theresa May's deal? They're just going to go like that. Well, Theresa May's got that. That's it. You need to work with that. That's what she's negotiated. We're not up for negotiations again. We're not going to go through another 2 years down the line of negotiation, just to get what you want. So for me, no. The other thing as well about Corbyn is the fact that he's for a free Palestine, a unified Ireland, but not an independent Scotland. Now, if he would come out and unequivocally say, yes, Scotland's got every right to put it back to the people. Fine, great, excellent. Let's put it back to the people and work from there. Right? Yeah. Give the second referendum to everybody in the UK, and if they choose to remain, then let's sit down and see what we can work out. Right? However, what they do is they then turn it on its head, and they turn around to Nicola and they say, yeah, but you'll just eventually want another independence referendum. Duh! The names, the clue is in the party name.
Let's leave the Labour Party there. Now, I know that I'm going to get into bother when I say this, but I'm not going to leave them out because it would be wrong to.
Don't you dare.
It would be wrong to leave these guys out. The Liberal Democrats.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because I thought you were going to pick the other one. Hopefully we'll get onto them in a minute. Liberal Democrats, again, a British establishment party, had got no inclination towards Scottish independence, any such which way. The only good thing about them is the fact that they do wish to remain. It's unfortunate that Willie Rennie, for me, is not a politician of any credibility
So let's swiftly move on to the Greens.
Right, now, getting on to the Greens, I have an awful lot of time for the Greens. I admire Patrick Harvie immensely, and I've got every respect for Maggie Chapman, who is the candidate for MEP. Maggie is a good socialist. She's got fantastic socialist values and ideals. She has seen firsthand, coming from South Africa, she has seen what xenophobia really is like up front and personal. She's seen it with her own eyes, and she absolutely abhors it. And she had an excellent performance on the chat the other night there with Colin Mackay, and she is 100% right. It is divisive, it's nasty, it's unwarranted. Honestly, it just breeds hatred and everything vile about politics, and that just derives from one thing: xenophobia. Right? It then snowballs onto racism, it then snowballs into bigotry, then it will go into sectarianism and all the rest of it, and it becomes an absolute monster in the room.
So there must be some independent folks out there, but we don't have a list of all of them. I suppose there's some independents, are there?
I
I
think
don't know.
there's 2 independent candidates, but again, I haven't heard an awful lot from them.
And I don't think we've missed out any of the parties,
No,
except for...
Except for...
So I wonder if you out there in television land have had any of the leaflets through your mail. I mean, I actually got one from each of the different organisations we've just mentioned, and we haven't got onto the last one yet. But if you have had one, or you've had more than one, or if you've had various different leaflets, maybe you just give a tweet to Broadcasting Scotland and let us know. So we come then to the SNP. What's their stance?
SNP, what's their stance? If you don't already know, basically a vote for the SNP is a vote to remain within Europe. It's a vote to remain European, because we are European. It's okay to say, you know, we wish to remain in Europe. First and foremost, we are European, and that is exactly where we need to be.
Last time you were here, Chris, you asked about us being also French citizens if we're Scottish citizens. And it was actually true. I looked it up when you'd gone, but it was actually revoked by a subsequent administration in France. But it was true.
Right. When was that revoked?
I'm sorry, I didn't put it in my head. It was only now that I thought of it, because I mean, obviously, if you want to have, what you've just said to me is, if you want to have an independent Scotland within Europe, SNP is the best place to put your vote.
Yeah.
And indeed, it would be maybe clever to, that's what you're saying, yeah? And obviously, some people might think, well, let's vote tactically. Would that be a wise thing, or...?
Not in the European elections, no. And I think everybody needs to be very, very clear. A vote for a unionist party is a vote against independence. It's as simple as that. And there is only 2 parties within Scotland that back independence and back being pro-European. And that is the SNP and the Scottish Greens.
So
I'm not about to tell a Green member that they have to switch allegiance and vote SNP. That's not fair, that's disingenuous, and it is disrespectful. I would urge them to vote for Maggie Chapman. She is a wonderful politician, and I think she will do great things in there. My dearest wish, the outcome, I think it's Sunday night that we get the results on this, is that if we have...
Final results Monday morning.
If we have 4 SNP MEPs, a Green, and I hate to be a spoiler here, folks, but I think that Labour, Lib Dem, Tory are going to bottom out, and unfortunately there's going to be one of them, and you are going to have a Brexit MEP.
We did a piece last evening about if it was in the Independent, I think, and it was if just a few people, half the people who were thinking of voting tactically, would come over and just vote for the biggest party, Lib Dems in London, in England, or the SNP here, we would actually categorically send the biggest message, because we would be a Remain country.
Correct. Yeah, but you and I know how the British media work, right? Now, if let's just say, for argument's sake, right, there's 6 MEPs in order to choose, right? If the SNP get 1. If the SNP get 3, right, and the Greens get 1, that's 4, right? You maybe get 1 for the Liberal Democrats, that's 5. Unfortunately, you are going to get 1 Brexit MEP. Unfortunately, that's the harsh reality. It's the way the demographics go, it's the way the percentages of the vote go in the Hunt system.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, I think, would be to avoid getting 2 Brexit people in there.
Yeah. Even although there might only be 1 Brexit MEP, is the fact that the British press will jump on that, and they will say, there you go. Scotland wants Brexit.
Yeah, I remember I was in one of the counts a while ago when UKIP were on the rise.
Yeah.
And you could just see it from the piles. And the TV reporter from the BBC asked me what I thought that she should report. And I said, well, I know what you should report, that these lot have upheld their place even against this deluge. But what you're going to report is that. And it's the way that people decide to look at what's happened and then to tell others about it.
Yeah, she's, you know, the BBC news agencies, or BBC, the UK news agencies. Let's not just generalise on dear old Auntie Beeb, but they are pushed by the right wing. They are mobilised by the right wing. They are the mouthpiece of the right wing British establishment, and they will champion everything to do with the British establishment. Do you know? The clue is in the name, British Broadcasting, right? You know, the subliminal cue of ITV is not quite as harsh, right? But anytime they get a royal piece or a conservative piece, it's champion for this, that and the next thing. The one point I was going to make earlier on, actually, and a thing that just whilst we were talking about shipbuilding, but I have to tie this in because it's all to do with Britannia, which really, really gets on my goat, is you know, the demise of British steel, and yet the mantra of the Unionists is rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves. Right? How are they going to rule the waves if there's no steel to build the bloody ship to start with?
Which brings us straight back to the European Union, which was the part of the founding of that was for the coal and steel being brought together to stop us having wars.
Correct.
That was a very nice little circle.
Correct.
So I think we're probably going to wind up now, Chris, because we've been blethering on for over an hour now.
I could go for an hour.
Well, just about an hour. So there is a note here, and it's, Dear voter, tomorrow you have the opportunity to make a difference, a real difference to the country's future. In tomorrow's European election, you can cast a vote for a better Scotland. The last 3 chaotic years at Westminster have been dominated by Brexit. In all that time, Scotland's interests have been ignored. Tomorrow, if we make our voices heard, that can change. The SNP is campaigning hard to stop Brexit. Our approach has been to work with other parties so that we can give people a final say on whether they wish to remain in the European Union or accept whatever the Brexit terms are agreed by the UK Parliament. In Scotland, the best way to bring about the outcome is to vote SNP. We are by some distance the strongest pro-European party. Therefore, a vote for the SNP is the most effective means to ensure remain supporting MEPs are elected. And we know from experience that Westminster sits up and takes notice when Scotland and the SNP does well. On the other side of the debate, those who are in favour of extreme Brexit, a no-deal outcome, are stepping up their efforts. That means there is a real danger we will all be at the mercy of further infighting among hardliners at Westminster for years to come. So, if ever there was a time to make a stand for the better, it is now. No one is saying that the EU is perfect, but being a part of Europe is good for jobs and investments and provides much greater opportunities for young people. Let's help to widen their horizons and give them hope for the future. It's good for the NHS because we can continue to attract highly valued staff who make such vital contribution to our care. In Scotland, we all cherished our well-deserved reputation of being welcoming and inclusive nation. A country that plays our part in building a better Europe and a better world. Tomorrow, we can reaffirm the kind of country we are and can be in the future. So it's time to stop Brexit. Please let your voice be heard. Think about the generations to come. Send a positive message of hope for the future. Vote SNP. Signed, Nicola Sturgeon, leader of the Scottish National Party. And she is the First Minister of Scotland. One thing I will tell you, that this voting in the European elections is with one cross on the ballot paper. We don't put, in other elections in Scotland, you put more than one cross. But in this election, it's one cross next to the party which you think you would like to have represent you in the European Parliament. And for all we've said today, whatever you choose, it's your choice, but please go to the polling station and make that choice on the 23rd, which is Thursday, which is tomorrow. And tomorrow night we'll have another special program. Gordon Ross will be here and I'll be here, and we're going to sign off now. There's that little film, another little film for you to finish off today's program. I do hope you will join us tomorrow and bring some other people along with you. Have one of these watch parties or something. Get a crowd of you in the parlour. And also Sunday evening, as the results come in, we'll have Victoria Johnson here with us and Corrie Wilson from Ayr and from the Highlands, and there will be other people in the studio with us. So I do hope that you've enjoyed tonight's programme. Thank you very much to Chris for your contributions. Always great to talk with you. Very, very man of great insight. Thank you very much too for watching, and see you tomorrow. Bye.